Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the live in-person and live Zoom worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Riverside. Our opening hymn this morning is number 112, Do You Hear, from the Gray Hymnal. Please feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but with your masks on. Please stand now in body or spirit and join us in singing hymn number 112, Do You Hear?
Stand through the sky, through the land. Do you hear? Do you hear? In the heights on the plain, in the vale on the plain, in the sun, in the rain. Do you hear? Do you hear? Through the road, through the rush, through the flow, through the crush. Do you hear in the hush of your soul, hear the cry, fear will still, hear the heart's call to will, hear a sigh, startling trill, in your soul, in your soul. From the place where you stand to the outermost strand, do you hear, oh my friend? Do you hear, do you hear? All the dreams, all the dares, all the sighs, all the prayers, they are yours, mine and theirs. Do you hear, do you hear? Do you hear, oh my friend, in the face, in the space, through the sky, through the sky? Do you hear, do you hear? In the heights, in the height, on the plain, in the vale, in the sun, in the sun. Do you hear, do you hear, do you hear?
Thank you for joining us here in person, and thank you for joining us remotely by Zoom, where we will continue live streaming and posting these services on our YouTube channel for our virtual attendees. I'm Grace Preuss, a member of the worship committee, and I will be your worship associate today. Other members of the worship committee that make this service possible include Alec Peck, our music coordinator, Adam Wedeking, who monitors our visual and online connections, and Kate Lewicki, who is in charge of our sound system. We welcome you to join us this morning with an open mind and an open heart, and with muted electronic devices, please. We come together this morning to remind one another that we are connected in mystery and miracle, awareness and gratitude. We have come to this time and place to explore different spiritual perspectives together, develop a faith that is personally meaningful, and to bring our gifts of love and service to this community and to each other. So welcome, and thank you for joining us today. Although our doors are open, the pandemic is not over. So while we are in the sanctuary, please keep your masks on while singing and take personal responsibility to keep ourselves and one another healthy and safe. Before we move into the service, there are a few announcements we would like to share. We will mention several websites, email addresses, and phone numbers. At the end of the service, we will leave up a slide with all of this information, and it is also available on our website. You can make an appointment at vaccine.ca.gov, or for more information on COVID and more options of vaccine locations, please go to covid19.ca.gov. Let's all take personal responsibility to protect ourselves and others, because we are all in this together. The first Sunday luncheon. Don't forget to join us next week after the service for the first Sunday luncheon. Next week, we will have a lunch hosted by Food Not Bombs. Pledge forms. Please remember, if you haven't already, to turn in your pledge form by April 2nd so that next year's budget can be planned. As we are all aware, general expenses continue to rise, and your support is genuinely needed and appreciated. Thank you. The yard sale has been canceled. A group has purchased all the items from the yard sale and is donating them to Savers. We are accepting donations of clothing and other small household items through April 14th. All of these items will be taken to Savers on April 15th. This concludes today's announcements. And now I invite you to sit back and take a slow, deep breath as we move into the worship hour. You are welcome to read with me the covenant of our church. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is a sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to live in service, all kind and all life in fellowship. Thus do we covenant. Today's speaker is UUCR member, Dr. Lee Greer. Lee is an evolutionary scientist, author, and educator. Linda and Lee have been members of the UU Church of Riverside for many years, and they have 3 children. From Mythos to Cosmos, Part 2, How Ancient Cosmic Events Shaped Our Myths. This is the second of the series from the Mythos to Cosmos lectures presented by Lee Greer. Last time we reviewed the origin of our early hominin ancestors more than 3 million years ago, the appearance of our genus Homo about 20 million years ago, about 2 million years ago, and through the emergence of anatomically modern Homo sapiens sapiens about 315,000 years ago. Humankind and our forebears used agency detection, personification, representational symbols, and tale-telling to model ourselves and our world. As meaning-making primates, we structured our representational sense of the universe and ourselves through art, myth, and story. From the recurring ice ages, interglacials of the Pleistocene, which is about 2,580,000 to about 11,700 years ago, to the milder Holocene, since about 11,700 years ago. A chaotic transition with extinctions occurred with a rapid warming melting, a cosmic impact, a severe freezing cold snap, followed by another rapid warming melting. This extreme whiplash of events forever altered our human myths, most notably in the Northern Hemisphere. We have 2 lightings of sacred flames. The first is the occupied Indigenous peoples' remembrance candle. The second is a lighting of our own chalice, the symbol of our faith. We walk upon the traditional territories of diverse and sovereign peoples, the original peoples of this land, who continue to cry out for justice and self-determination. This spot we occupy was first a sacred space of several groups of Indigenous peoples, including the Cahuilla, the Cupeño, and the Serrano. We, the Universalist Unitarian Church of Riverside, light this sacred flame as the stewards of this sacred and holy place. We are blessed with the space and opportunity to strive to live out our common principles, to bring justice, equity, and compassion into our daily lives, to resist all that threatens the earth and her people, and to be part of a world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all. Let these thoughts carry us forth as we journey and worship together. Today's reading for the chalice lighting is from the Singing the Living Tradition hymnal number 451 by Leslie Pohl Kosbaum. Flame of fire, spark of the universe that warmed our ancestral hearth, agent of life and death, symbol of truth and freedom. We strive to understand ourselves and our earthly home. Thank you, Bill. Now we move on to greeting our guests. We have a tradition here at UUCR to welcome those who are visitors or perhaps returning after some time away. So I will now ask for a volunteer from someone who has been here a while to tell us your name and how you found out about our church. We ask you to step close to the mic in front of the pulpit and speak into it directly and clearly so that everyone can hear. Please be aware that you will be visible on our Zoom camera and in the recording of this service, which is posted online. So now, do we have any church members who'd like to volunteer? Sandra, thank you. Tell us your name, how long you have been here, and how you found out about our church.
Good morning.
Morning.
Oh, okay. Okay. Good morning. My name is Sandra Verhagen, and I've been coming here off and on for about 20 years. I found this church by accident. I was looking for another speaker, and I came to this address by mistake, and I liked what Matthew had to say, so I stayed.
Thank you, Sandra. And that's how it's done. So if you are new here, a visitor, or an old friend, please raise your hand to stand up and come up to the mic in front of the pulpit to introduce yourselves. Do we have anyone who'd like to come up? Not today. Oh. The lady in the back. Good morning. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Akaya Tenorio. I'm new here.
You can take off your mask.
Oh, sure. My name is Akaya Tenorio. I'm new here. This is the first time I've ever came to this church. But I've seen this church since my grandfather lives not too far from here. So I used to come and see the inside, but never come for a service. And I'm here with my boyfriend for the first time too. I'm just kind of excited to see what you guys teach us. It's very interesting. I was raised Christian, so this will be very interesting to see the differences between the religions.
Very good. It's nice to have you here. Thank you. If there's someone else in the audience who'd like to step up? No? Okay. Is there someone online who'd like to introduce themselves? If you could raise your hand, we'll call on you by Zoom. For any other new guests, please join us for socializing and coffee hour after the service. We'd love to chat with you out in the parish hall, where you can also find our visitors book. Please leave your name before you leave so that we know you are here, and leave your contact information if you'd like to know about upcoming events. For those online, the best way to get added to the mailing list is to email the church office at admin@uuchurchofriverside.org. Our hymn now is number 1064 from the Teal hymnal. Feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but once again, only with the masks on. Please stand now in body and spirit, and join us in singing number 1064, Blue Boat Home. Sharing our stewardship. Today is 50-50 Sunday, which is held every fourth Sunday of the month. If you wish to donate to the 50-50 program, half of each designated donation goes to the featured organization and half to the general fund. This is in addition to your pledge to the church. Please write 50-50 on the memo line of your check or on the envelope that you find in the pews. Today, we divide our 50-50 funds with the Inland Empire Harm Reduction Organization. This organization provides harm reduction services to at-risk members of our community. Today, we have Shireen here with us, a representative of the organization, and she'll be coming up here to speak a little bit on what they do.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for having us here and for sharing your donations with us. That's really amazing. My name's Shireen. I work for an organization called Inland Empire Harm Reduction. We are a syringe service program here in Riverside County. So our mission is to improve the health and well-being of people affected by drug use. We were founded in 2018 and authorized in 2020 to provide these services here to folks living in the county. Excuse me. So some of the things that we do is overdose prevention. So we do education like this, teaching folks how to use Narcan, also distributing Narcan in the community. We do syringe access, healthcare, and community resource referrals. So let's see, I'm not going to do our whole presentation, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about what harm reduction is, if some folks are not familiar. So harm reduction is a set of evidence-based practical strategies and ideas aimed at reducing the negative consequences associated with drug use. It's a movement for social justice built on the belief in and respect for people who use drugs. And it meets people where they're at, and we provide a non-judgmental space for folks who use drugs. So some of the principles of harm reduction are health and dignity. We believe that just because a person uses drugs, we believe that they still deserve the same health and dignity that someone who doesn't choose to use drugs does. We center our services around our participants. So nothing that we do is like provider-based. It's all based on the needs of the community. We involve our participants. We have a peer board, which involves folks from the community who come in, and we talk about budgeting. We talk about how our services are run, what needs to change, things like that. Harm reduction, one of the principles is also pragmatism and realism. So we don't ignore the risks or the harms associated with drug use. We also don't glamorize them. We understand that there is harms associated with drug use, and we aim to educate folks and provide the services that they need to keep themselves safe. So let's see. So when we talk about harm reduction with our organization, since we are a syringe service program, we focus on drug use, but harm reduction is an umbrella set of principles that you use in your daily life, probably. Well, for sure. Things like seatbelts are harm reduction, right? Cars have proven to be dangerous. People crash, they get hurt. So seatbelts, speed limits, defensive driving, looking in your mirrors, that's all harm reduction. That's all ways that you reduce your risk when you are involved in a risky behavior, right? So one thing that we always talk about is the language that we use when we talk about people who use drugs. So using person first language. So changing the way we talk about people who use drugs is really important, and a thing that we educate a lot of people on. So things like changing the word addict from our vocabulary to a person with substance use disorder. Changing this idea of dirty and clean. We hear that a lot when it's associated with people who use drugs. And this kind of language is really stigmatizing. So instead of saying dirty or clean, we could say a person who uses drugs, a person who is abstaining from drugs, things like that. Okay, what else do I want to tell you about? I guess we could get into using Narcan and how it works. Let me grab my Narcan. And we'll have these available for you in the front if you want to have one. So Narcan or naloxone comes in a box like this. This is one way that you can get it. This is the nasal spray. Inside there's 2 doses and the doses look like this. Okay, so this Narcan is an opioid overdose reverser. So it reverses the effects of an opioid. So it works on opioids, so like heroin and things like that, fentanyl. Someone could not know that they have taken an opioid. So even if this person is a person who you're unsure of what they use or, aren't aware that they were using, you can still give them naloxone. It won't harm them. It doesn't have any harmful effects. You won't cause any harm to them if you're incorrect in your thinking. So, so one thing is, why would you learn to respond to an overdose? A lot of people ask us that, they're like, I'm not a drug user. Why would I want to respond? Why would I want to learn this? In 2022, 681 Riverside County residents lost their lives to an overdose. Here at Inland Empire Harm Reduction, we received, 471 reports of overdose reversals. So, and we think that that number is really low. People aren't always calling every time they use naloxone. We gave out almost 13,000 doses of naloxone last year. So we're sure a lot more were used than were reported. So an overdose happens when too much of a substance goes into our body and overwhelms it. So opioids go into our brain receptors, and it's the same brain receptors that tell our bodies to breathe. So when our body is overwhelmed, our body will stop breathing, which is what leads to death. Sorry, I'm skipping all the other stuff. So how can you spot an overdose? So there can be a lot of different things that you will see, especially if someone is using multiple substances or is unaware that they have used an opioid. But the main thing that you want to look for is someone who's unresponsive. So they're not responding to you when you're calling their name. You can give them a shake. They are not responding to painful stimuli. So you could make a fist here and you could rub really hard on their sternum and make sure you tell them, I'm going to Narcan you. Okay. So this will help you if someone is just really high and not overdosing and you thought that they were. So some people also say that you hear like a choking or gurgling sound in the back of their throat. Also, you want to look for like blue nails or lips, which is a sign of not getting any oxygen. That's for people with lighter skin. With people with darker skin, it might be a more grayish color. And slow, shallow breathing. Those are the most important things to look for. So to administer nasal naloxone, it's really easy. You'll just tilt the person's head back after you try to wake them up. You'll tilt their head back and you will put this into one of their nostrils and just press the plunger and it'll be released into their system. You want to wait 2 to 3 minutes before you administer another dose. Sometimes, depending on what the person has taken, it can take more than 1 dose of naloxone. So you'll want to administer this, wait 2 to 3 minutes. And during that time, you'll want to do rescue breaths. So you'll pinch their nose, make sure their airway is open and breathe for them. 1 breath every 5 to 6 seconds. It's very easy to use. So once you spray it and then you perform rescue breaths, you'll wait for them to wake up. It's always recommended to call 911. I know sometimes that's not safe for everyone. If that is something that you are worried about, when you call for 911, you can say someone is unconscious, they aren't breathing, and police will be less likely to show up. There's also laws that protect you in this kind of situation. If there are drugs involved, there's a Good Samaritan law, which I would recommend that you look up. And it provides some protection for like paraphernalia or drugs on the scene of an overdose. But definitely look it up because depending on your situation, it could not provide you the protection that it provides other people. And yeah, that's pretty much how you use Narcan. Is there any questions about our program? Mm-hmm.
Is there a point where you guys come to a point
Yeah, so that's right. Trying to reduce the harm. We hear that a lot in harm reduction. Like, isn't this enabling drug use since you're giving people safe use supplies? And a lot of people do think that. But one thing to remember is harm reduction organizations and certain service programs did not invent drugs. Drugs have been around for millions of years, right? And people will make the choices that they want to make for themselves. So when it comes to harm reduction, we focus on an individual's goals. What do your goals look like? What are your needs? What are you trying to do with your drug use? Do you want to reduce your use? How can we help you, right? And we provide linkage to care if someone is looking for sober living or rehabilitation services, MAT services, things like that. But yeah, we don't focus on like, you have to be sober to be a part of this organization or anything like that. Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah. Yep, that's right. We have these resources. If you want them, we'll help you get them. We provide a caring, compassionate, judgment-free space for folks to come. A lot of times people who use drugs are kicked out of society, right? Their children are taken away from them. They lose their jobs. Yeah, they lose housing. They lose lots of things just because of the fact that they use drugs. So our spaces are safe. Our spaces are compassionate, regardless of a person's choices. Absolutely. Say it again. So we haven't come across it yet. We know that on the East Coast, it has been really affecting folks. 90% of some of the drug supply in Philadelphia has been found to have tranq in it. Here in this county, we have heard about it in San Francisco. We have heard about it in LA, and there have been 2 deaths associated with tranq here in the county. But we don't have testing kits yet. We don't really have, there's not much that we can do to like prepare for it. But yeah, we're definitely worried about it and keeping an eye on it to see what's going on with that. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, so we give them out all over Riverside County, and you can pick them up in our office. We have an office off Central on Mondays and Wednesdays from 11 to 5:30. We'll also have a box in front for anyone who wants them, and we'll leave the extras for folks who come later. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you, Shireen, for that information and for all of the beneficial work that you do in our community. Thank you. Okay. Now we move on to the regular portion of our service. This portion of our stewardship service, this portion of our service is to support our beloved historical church. This can be accomplished in several ways. In addition to the weekly collection, you may send your checks to the church address, which is shown here. You may contribute by PayPal using the QR code, which is shown here, as well as on the church website and in the newsletter. Stater Brothers Market gives our church a rebate on Stater's grocery cards, which we will have in church each Sunday. You get the full value, and the church also receives a percentage for free. Please see Bill Rowe today, Bill, if you are interested in purchasing the gift cards. Please donate as the Spirit moves you by whatever method works best for you. Thank you for your generosity, and to those who give of their time and their talent, thank you for your generous care and attention. Will our ushers now please come forward to receive the collection? Our next hymn is number 402, From You I Receive, from the Gray Hymnal. Please feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but with your masks on. Now join us standing in body or spirit, and join us in singing hymn number 402, From You I Receive.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, from this we live. From you I receive,
Now I would like to introduce Dr. Lee Greer up to the pulpit, who will lead us in a responsive reading and then speak to us on the topic From Mythos to Cosmos, Part 2, How Ancient Cosmic Events Shaped Our Myths.
Good morning, and thank you very, very much. And I really appreciate the appeal for harm reduction. One of the best answers is you're saving somebody's life so that they can have a chance to do whatever they want to do later in their life. So it's simply life-saving work. If life-saving work is enabling, may we all become enablers. So, okay, so I will read. This is from 24 in the Gray Hymnal. Reading number 24. Out of the stars in their flight, out of the dust of eternity, here we have come. Stardust and sunlight mingling through times and through space. The stars come up through time. The stars we have come. Time out of time, before time, in the vastness of space. Earth spun to orbit. Earth with the thunder of mountains newborn, the boiling of seas. It's warmed by the sunlight, lit by sunlight. This is our home. Out of the stars we have come. Mystery hidden in mystery, back through all time. Mystery rising from rocks in the storm and the sea. In the rocks and the sea. Ponder this thing in your heart. Ponder with awe. Out of the sea to the land, out of the shallows came ferns. Stars to the land, from darkness to light, rising to walk and fly. Out of the sea trembled life. Ponder this thing in your heart. Life up from the sea, eyes to behold, throats to sing, mates to love. From the sea, formed by the sun, washed by rain, life from within, giving birth, rose to love. This is the wonder of time. This is the marvel of space. Out of the stars swung the earth. Life upon earth rose to love. This is the marvel of life. Rising to see and to know. Out of your heart, cry wonder. Sing that we live. Thank you. So we're going to continue here with some things that we discussed last time. I spoke back in November, but I will review a little bit to bring you up to date on that. Just a second or two. Here we are. There we are. And now I will share screen, or I will attempt to do that. Here, actually, I'm going to stop sharing just for a second because I've picked the wrong thing there. There we go. So this is a continuing of our discussion of from myth to cosmos. And last time we discussed how human beings arose in what may be called the Eden of humankind in the world, which is the East African Rift Valley system. Here seen from space. Here's the Horn of Africa. Here's the rift system between the Indian Ocean and the African or the old Gondwanan plate, and the rift zones going up there is the Middle East up there. And this little montage shows a journey that goes over 3 million years, and actually over 6 million years, for bipedal apes, bipedal primates of our subfamily hominin. Okay, starting in the forest and moving out. At 3.3 million years ago, we have evidence of the first tool use. Long before there was a human, there was a Homo sapiens. Fire use came long before there were human beings too. So cultural appropriation, we have made use both on tool use and on fire from humans. And what is interesting about this rock here, which is the Makapansket cobble, is that it is a rock which has been carried in hand over several kilometers from its source rock, found in a cave where Australopithecine afarensis lived. Various species of Australopithecus, which is the ancestral genus to our species. And what we notice here is it's a natural rock that resembles a face. It meant something to the person carrying it, not for any use that it has, but because it resembled an Australopithecine face. That is self-awareness there. Now, all of us who have actually been around animals know that cats and dogs are also self-aware and so forth. But what this tells you is symbolism, our use of symbolism. And with the rise of our brain capacity, we have used manuports of natural objects that looked like things that were important to us. You can recognize them. And all of these are things that naturally looked like they were important to us. Okay? The earliest stages of art, of course, involved inscription of patterns and use of numbers. Very, very, very interesting. And this is from a couple 100,000 years ago. Remember, we mentioned in the introduction that humankind is, as a Homo sapiens sapiens, that means anatomically modern humans, are over 315,000 years now, as of the latest data on that front. Okay. Now, during this period of time, we have gone through many changes in climate and in environment. A proxy for temperature and climate changes is our stable isotope, oxygen 18, which rises and falls with temperature. So when we go back in the records, we can actually trace how temperature went. And during this period of time, of course, these are other members of our species, of our genus, but not of our species. There have been many members of the genus Homo, but not all of them have been part of sapiens, which is, of course, we have a very self-satisfied way of naming our species, right? The wise ones, right? LOL. Okay. So here are some of the early tools, an Acheulean hand axe. Here are patterns on a stone, these circles that meant something to our ancestors on stones from hundreds of thousands of years ago. Okay, what you have is creativity thought, symbolism, all of those things appearing and leaving marks behind and making use of numbers. Okay. Now, if we zoom forward to the last 20,000 years, these are the basic patterns of human migration out of Africa. All of us are part of the African diaspora, just separated by a few thousand years one way or the other. The blue lines are maternal. Those are actually maternal haplotypes in our mitochondrial DNA. This is DNA you only receive from your mother and from your matrilineage. And it traces the pattern back, and using coalescent theory, we can trace back the different stages moving out of Africa and spreading to the corners of the earth. Notice that there is a southerly route and a more northerly route. Then the light yellow arrows, that is our Y chromosome patrilineal, and this part is only traceable by males, okay, because only males, ordinarily biological males, have a Y chromosome. So it also traces a similar pattern. Males, for some odd reason, went the same way that females did around the earth. Okay. Now, during the last glacial maximum of the Pleistocene, here we have the extent of northern glaciers, again superimposed with these patterns. Now, a number of years ago at a conference, I gave evidence linking indigenous flood stories with Y chromosome dispersal. And it was a group of people that were actually fairly religious. And when I showed how flood stories were most common in areas where people had gone on more northerly migration routes, there was kind of a dead silence within the room. That's actually 30 years ago that event happened. Now, just like we can trace DNA, we can trace units of mythology as well, called motifs. Here is a database by Bereshkin and Devakin. It's written in Russian, but here's the English version here. And you can trace where different motifs arose and trace them just like languages or DNA, the migration of our mythological stories. You can use the same statistical methods. So here is our basic migration patterns, the northern route and the southern route, okay? And it has given rise to two suites of stories. Michael Witzel, a Sanskritist, and has taken and combined together linguistics, mythological motifs, and the work of us who are in phylogenetic systematics and human biogeography, and pointed out that there is a southern group of cosmologies or stories and a northern group. Okay, the Afro-Austro-Melanesian have a certain number of commonalities to their stories and myths, and the Afro-Transcaucasian, Laurasian Amerind have another group of commonalities. One, I'm going to point out a couple differences here. Similarities, they all talk about a time in the past and humans coming to be, and there's different mythological motifs. It just so happens after the creation of humans, there is a flood story on the southern, but the world has no beginning and has no end. Okay? The more northern routes have primordial waters, nothing, chaos, beings, generations of titans and giants, Father Earth, Father Sky, Mother Earth, so forth. A series, think of the 4 declining ages of Hesiod, the Greek, and the Olympians versus the Titans, all of that. And that over thousands and thousands of years gets distilled. If it sounds vaguely familiar, it's because it ended up in the very, very super young set of religions called the Abrahamic religions, which are only about, 2,300 years, a couple millennia, a little over a couple millennia, up to approaching 3 millennia, but mostly closer to 2 millennia, out of 315 millennia, okay? So our religions are not old, right? And there are these two events which happen. Now, let's look at what could have given rise to these sets of events. Here is the Laurentian ice sheet on the North American continent, and we're going to visualize some of the Ice Age floods. Remember, when climate changes, ice begins to melt and water has to go somewhere, right? Okay. Now, just a reminder, the Earth has been around for about 4.567 billion years, and I'm not kidding. Those are the numbers to three significant digits. Okay, you can find the information and all of the literature. It's a wonderful thing about science. It's publicly available, paid for by your tax dollars. No one has to give you a vision, so you can investigate for yourself. So if I'm lying to you, you can go and read the literature. Okay. Well, here is, of course, our planet has been here for billions of years. Okay. For billions of years. I just want to show you a picture of how just a relation here. Whoops. Pardon me. Just a second here. Part of this is on the website, is on the internet, and part of it is not. So therefore, I have to get you over. Just a moment. Sorry, things are going too slow. The one thing that I did not open up before I got up here was a page which I need right now. My apologies. All right, let's see here. Grab this from over here. And I want you to know, because just like the reading we did today, our planet arose from some violent events, which happened quite a long time ago, 4.567 billion years ago. That's not being approximate. That's just saying it as it is there. Okay. So if we were to look, of course, is born, just like sunflowers come and go in spring, stars come and go, galaxies come and go. And if the Southern cosmology is right, universes come and go, whole systems come and go, and we're all part of a changing system where hydrogen is turned into other elements and planets are made, life spreads throughout the universe, and all that. So here are young solar systems being born, by the way. The same thing, the process that happened 4.567 billion years ago for us as our star was igniting. We can photograph it and look at it back in time. Here is the birth of a star. Here is what a protoplanetary disk, after a star has ignited, it sends off a jet, Herbig-Haro objects. Here's an artist's conception of what one of those would look like. And our sun lit, and the solar winds began to clear out, and in a series of violent events, our planet was formed. Okay. At 4.4 billion years, we have evidence of life. So evidence, most likely life did not begin here, it came from elsewhere. We've seen the direct spectral evidence. Okay, so that's just to remind you of the time scale. And now back to my original page there. Okay, here we are back here again. All right, so that is the time scale that we're dealing with, and we can trace climate, for instance. Okay, here's over the last 65 million years. Here's proxies for temperature. We're actually in a cold time, right? Okay, compared to much of Earth history. Then here's the last 7 million years, coming into the present, a gradual colding of time. And during the Pleistocene, the cycles got more wild. Here's the last 5 million years. Here is the last 500,000 years with a series of cycles. Notice that there's a rapid warming then a long cooling, rapid warming, long cooling. And here we are here, of course, moving in closer. What we talk about global warming today is a little tiny blip that doesn't even show on this graph, right? Remember, we have to think in terms of the large scales. And temperature can be shown by various data proxies, which stand in for actually measuring the temperature and showing how climate change has happened. And this can be correlated between the northern hemisphere. Here is the ice record over the last 60,000 years between Epicodome in Antarctica and Grip in Greenland. Okay, the downturns, I think there's a slight delays, but they can be clarified. Here is in a cave at Adovacik in northern Turkey. Again, these cold events, which are called Dansker-Esker events, we can mark 13 of them in the stalactites of that cave. And then here is the warming up to our current warming time of the Holocene. Okay. Now, what is interesting as we look at the extinction patterns over the Pleistocene, which is 2.58 million years to 11,700 years ago, is that most of the extinctions happen during the warming periods. Interesting. And there were repeating warming periods within that periods, within the Pleistocene, that epoch. And of course, the great Ice Age mammals, those of you who watched the cartoon years ago and all that, you'll remember them trying to escape the end of the Ice Age, right? And all that. That's most of those went extinct in that transition, although extinction is always happening from Pleistocene to Holocene. Matter of fact, if you use, oh, here, let me make this bigger so everyone can see this. So here is a look at dinosaur bones. I'm sorry, not dinosaurs bones, but mammoth bones, particularly on an island there. This is effective population size, which those of us in the evolutionary biology side look at for how healthy a population is in Darwinian terms or in evolutionary terms. And with that warming, the N sub E, or effective population size, dropped right after 12,000 years ago, showing that it is those climate major shifts that lead to extinctions. Okay. Now, I want you to look at this graph. Remember, I told you there was a southern cosmology and a northern cosmology. These two southern here are Epica and Vostok on Antarctica. Notice that they show the same basic patterns, but this is the one from the Arctic. Notice the patterns are much more severe. Isn't it interesting? You know, data is always beautiful. Okay. All right. What this is what you have is something that corresponds and explains why you've got more violent stories and mythologies in the more northern hemisphere because of more violent changes. All right, now let's zoom in on the last 17,000 years, because the last glacial maximum was about 21 to 25,000 years ago. Here is an event here where it was starting to cool down. There was a sudden warming, then a sudden cooling, which is a return of the Ice Age, okay, in an area called the Younger Dryas. And then the zoom up into warming, which brings us to our time at 11,700 years ago into our more modern climate regime. Here is summer insolation. That's the reflectivity of how much heat is reflected back into space and so forth being traced. Now, these three cycles are based on the fact that there's a little flowering plant. It's an Arctic alpine flower, which is called the mountain avens, Dryas octopetala. All right, and this little flower leaves its pollen in the stratigraphic record, and it spreads further south during cold periods. So you have the oldest Dryas, then you have the older Dryas. You know, this warming within here is called an Alurod bowling event. And then you have the end of the Alurod plunging down, and the Younger Dryas spreads out again up until the final melt 11,700 years ago. And we can trace this by looking for the pollen of this little flower in the record. So remember, when the Ice Age spread over much of the northern hemisphere, what you had is that the Arctic tundra went south, right? Meaning down into Kansas and Arkansas and wherever as the Arctic polar caps went down, and it left a little record, and that's what was referred to as the Younger Dryas. And here again it is, the bowling Alarod, Younger Dryas, and then that. Now, this whiplash of events that we described started about 14,700 years ago. There was a catastrophic event about 12,900 years ago, and then the warming 11,700 years ago. Now, from the last glacial maximum, if you were to look at the coastlines of the Earth, what you would see is that these red areas, that the Earth's eustatic low stand was 400 feet below current sea levels. All of this was exposed. Then at meltwater pulse 1b, which is about 14,000 years ago, the sea levels rose until they were about 150 feet below the current stand. Okay, and then they rose up at meltwater pulse 1b, 11,700 years ago, to our modern coastlands. And it just so happens that there is an event which was fairly catastrophic, and you can see it in the records. Now, this was very controversial to begin with. At 12,900, and the dates were refined to 12,800 years ago, there was a very sharp event or series of events that took place that scattered melted glass spherules, high levels of rare earth elements at a particular stratigraphic level, which has been dated. Okay, that transition there was very much pointed out by Firestone and his fellow workers in a 2007 paper, saying evidence for an extraterrestrial impact 12,900 years ago that contributed to megafaunal extinctions, that's of the Ice Age animals, and to the Younger Dryas cooling. They published that, and of course, scientists being a fractious group, there was a big fight arose over it, back and forth, arguments back and forth. No, that's not, it's all in your head or whatever. And so they had these big arguments, papers went back and forth. It turned out, of course, that the catastrophists were right. Just like the catastrophists are, just like the uniformitarians are right about the long age of the Earth, the catastrophists are right about all the disasters that have taken place in Earth's history. And this was confirmed. Here's Bunch et al. 2012. What you have are actually high impact spherules where they have collided into each other. These are scattered over much of the northern hemisphere. Okay. And it's at an area called the Younger Dryas boundary, YDB. Temperatures actually rose up to over 2,000 degrees briefly and scattered this mess all around. Here are locations where the Younger Dryas boundary has been studied. It has been dated. Here are the carbon-14, calibrated carbon-14 ages, which all coincide very close to 12,800 years ago. Here are more of these spherules. Here is that layer. Here's a mammoth bone. Here's a Paleo Native American Indian Clovis point. And that ends here. And then here's the Holocene. And a black mat appears across there. Multiple sites. You can see that. Here is a primordial, a prehistoric bison kill. Here is the Younger Dryas boundary. This Clovis point, this post-Clovis Folsom point, this Clovis point was found at this level. Here's the bison kill and collaborated up there. Here is post-Younger Dryas artifacts here, like the archaic Palmer point and so forth. And throughout, you've got a field of these distributed event items thrown all over the place across the northern hemisphere. Now, this is the known boundary at the time of the writing of this paper. It may extend further than this, which is that field. Not only that, here's a Bayesian summary. That's a statistical summary of the dating methods, confirming that this was between 12,835 to 12,735, a very sharp, distinct event which took place. Had signs of biomass burning. That's what forms that black mat, which has been found in many places along with the spherules, along with the nanodiamonds, along with the signs of high melt. Okay. Now, if you ever look out and feel uncomfortable about the sky, you should. It's a shooting gallery. Okay. All right. There is a group, meteor showers come in what are called groups, and they name them after where the radiant appears to be out of a particular constellation. So the Taurids, which are associated with the constellation Taurus, because that's the direction from which they come, in certain resonance, in certain years, there are larger bolides which do not fit the pattern. They actually rise above it. They're part of what is called the Taurid complex. And in years of what are called resonances, where something disturbs the orbit of the Taurid swarm, these heavier Taurids appear up there. And guess what? That Taurid swarm can be dangerous for us and is the likely place of asteroids that can be multiple hundreds of meters across to multiple kilometers across, meaning catastrophic events for Earth. Here is the study that looked at some of these fireballs at one of those resonance years. This is the semi-major axis and the scalar longitude. Look how they cluster together at the 7-2 resonance. Now, if you look at Earth history, and this is the age in millions of years, okay, and these here, this is the data from the EarthPack database. These are the impact events and also the geologic boundaries and the extinctions that are associated with those events. Multiple times over the history of the Earth, asteroids have destroyed large parts of life on Earth. That sounds like a story of death. It's actually a story of life, because after every one of those extinction events, there is an adaptive evolutionary radiation of new life filling the ecological niches left behind by the extinction. Now, it just so happens that some of our ancient ancestors, of course, being storytellers, would remember these events, right? Do you think they might come down to us in oral tradition? Well, it turns out that in Plato's Timaeus, there is a story where Plato's ancestor, Plato writing about 360 BCE, before the Common Era, and his ancestor Solon, the Athenian lawgiver, made a trip to one of the centers of wisdom of the time, which was ancient Egypt, okay? And he visited some temples in ancient Egypt, Solon, Plato's ancestor. So the story goes in Timaeus, and there was a particular, at a temple at Sais, there was a particular aged priest who was interested in this young Greek, this Hellen, coming to talk to this ancient civilization, which was less affected by climate change, right? Being there in the Nile Delta, right? Now, you may remember that in one of the 10-12 myths of creation that are in the Hebrew Bible, the second one of those talks about where the Garden of Eden was watered from below and not from rain above, right? Well, this priest alludes to the fact that Egypt is watered from below by the flooding of the Nile, right? Interesting, right? Okay, so what he says is this. So one of the priests, it's very aged, he looks and says, "Oh, Solon, you Hellenes, you Greeks are never anything but children. There's not an old man among you." And Solon said, well, what do you mean? He said, "I must say that in mind you are all young. There is no old opinion handed down among you by ancient tradition, nor any science which is hoary with age. And I will tell you why. There have been and will be again many destructions of mankind, arising out of many causes, the greatest which are brought by the agencies of fire and water," right? "And there are lesser ones by innumerable other causes." Now, there is a story which even you have preserved, that once upon a time, Pathon, the son of Helios, this is Greek mythology, having yoked his steeds to his father's chariot, because he was not able to drive them in the path of his father, burnt up all that was upon the earth, and was himself killed, struck by a thunderbolt. That's from Greek mythology. Now, this has the form of a myth, but really signifies a declination. Now, this is what the old Egyptian priest says here, a declination of the bodies moving in the heavens around the earth, which means they knew about the wobble of the earth's axis, okay? And a great conflagration of things, that's a big fire of things on the earth, which recurs after long intervals. Do you remember we talked about the repeated cycles of Dunshig Ushker events, warming events, and interglacials during the Pleistocene, right? And he says, during these times, at times, those who live upon the mountains and in dry and lofty places are more liable to destruction than those who dwell by rivers or on the seashore. And from this climate, the Nile, which is our never-ending savior, delivers and preserves us. When on the other hand, the gods purge the earth with a deluge of water, the survivors of your country are herdsmen and shepherds who dwell in the mountains. But those like you live in cities or are carried away by the rivers into the sea. Whereas in this land, neither then nor at any other time does the water come down from above on the fields, having always a tendency to come up from below, for which reason the traditions preserved here are the most ancient. Okay? Now, Solon asked him, so, well, when did this last destruction take place? The old priest said 9,000 years ago, okay, from his time, which is, so Plato lived 300 years before the Common Era. Solon, 600 years before the Common Era, 650 years, right? Add 9,000 to that, you come back to where? 12,800. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? 11,700. Okay, which is exactly what the timing of meltwater pulse 1b is, which is where through the Enuma Elish and all the other stories eventually ended up in our Bible as the flood stories. Okay, so here is this catastrophe, right? The fireball, the meltwater, the first meltwater pulse 1a. There's the older Dryas, 10,800 years ago, the younger Dryas impact event, which probably hit the Laurentide ice sheet on the North American continent, caused vast melting. Bunch of cold fresh water dumped into the North Atlantic drift along the eastern coast, shut that down and caused the earth to drop back into a cold spell for 1,300 years, which is called the Younger Dryas. And of course, here are ancient humans saying, help, here comes the Younger Dryas, right? Okay, all right. And there were probably multiple impacts. Now, it's very interesting that our northern myths talk about a violent time when the sun turns black, earth sinks into the sea, because as meltwater goes off, the land springs up and there is subsidence in the basaltic ocean crusts. And you've got legends and stories, myths about Medusa, there's Phaeton and the chariot, Ragnarok up among Norse myth, Thor's hammer, you knew there was got to be something worthwhile out of the Marvel movies, right? Okay. All right. Mentions of comets all the way down, how comets are associated with times of destruction. Remember, there were superstitions about comets. Well, there's a very good reason, right? A comet actually hits, you got major problems, right? Okay. Now, since these mythologies have been discovered, have been discussed, and we know about Plato's story of Atlantis. Okay, a city in northern Turkey, or a place in northern Turkey called Göbekli Tepe, has been excavated. It's 11,600 years old. Yes, immediately after. So for those who have seen the series on Netflix called Ancient Catastrophe, they tell part of what I'm saying right now, a lot less nerdy sounding, right? Okay. Now, Dr. Martin Sweatman, who has done work there, he looked and realized that on some of the pillars there are pictographs 11,600 years ago, and they have memorialized an event looking at constellations of their time, right? They have memorialized an event, a violent event. And then they purposefully buried Göbekli Tepe, which is a temple, is purposely covered over like a time capsule, like a message of warning to the future. Okay, what did the aged priest say? He said, humankind has been destroyed many times, right? Multiple times, he said, and the most recent time was 9,000 years ago. So Marty Sweatman, as he looked at these, he figured out that basically they were aware of the 26,000-year cycle of the wobble of the equatorial, because the Earth is like a gyro, of the pole, the North Pole in its direction against the fixed stars beyond. Okay, and memorialized an event which showed that there was a catastrophe at a certain point. Now, where did the spring equinox happen 12,800 years ago? Okay, well, the spring equinox happened when Leo rose on the spring equinox. Now, what's the spring equinox? And remember, what I'm talking about now is constellations. Our big imaginations have always seen patterns in the stars, just like you see faces in clouds, right? I'm not speaking in favor of astrology. If it makes sense for you, you do it, but you do you, right? But there isn't anything to that in real terms. But since we are pattern-seeking beasts, right? Okay, we look for patterns, and guess what? We discard the stuff that doesn't fit the pattern. So it's called confirmation bias, all of that stuff. That's why, as Alexander Pope, the poet, said, all looks yellow to the jaundiced eye, right? Yeah, very true. All looks yellow to the jaundiced eye. Well, it just so happens 12,800 years ago, the equinox, which is where the sun's orbit, the ecliptic, crosses the equator on the first day of spring when the sun is in Leo. Now, isn't it interesting that the Sphinx is a human-headed lion facing the spring equinox? Somebody there might have remembered an event too. Okay, all right, and of course all of those things. Now, this is the most recent round. Remember, our gods primarily before then were female figures, right? Okay. Somehow, the males, after a bunch of destruction or whatever, the males thought, oh, time for us to have our gods now, right? Okay. And whatever the source of the universe is, remember, all of our gods are invented, right? There may well be a divine power behind the universe and all of that, but when it looks suspiciously like humans, the characteristics, has fits of anger, jealousy, is genocidal, all of that stuff, gets jealous when the lover runs off, gets a divorce, and gets more ornery, all of that stuff, which I'm telling you is the history of the Abrahamic deities, plural, by the way, okay? You can know that, as Voltaire said, God may have created us in his image, and we returned the favor, right? Okay, so basically what we're looking at is a time when we remembered, okay, that these catastrophes had taken place. Now, once we know the causes of things, then it helps us to understand, in cultural understanding across different religions, recognize our common humanity. We as Unitarian Universalists don't go for any of the covenantal in-group, out-group amorality, and it is amorality. If you treat somebody inside differently than treat somebody else, it ain't moral. Whatever it is, it's not moral, okay? Then what we see is that we should learn from these things to be more compassionate and recognize that we're all earthlings, all sailing on that blue boat home. Exactly. The ancient Epicurean poet Virgil said this, quoted by a radical deist and Locke student, Anthony Collins, in his 1715 Discourse on Free Thinking. Happy is the man or woman, says the divine Virgil, who has discovered the causes of things and is thereby cured of all kinds of fears, and is even of death itself and all the noise and din of hell. And that other great founder of the Enlightenment, Benedict Spinoza, who was thrown out of the synagogue and hated by the churches, and they hounded him, and he published his most heretical work upon instructions on his death, while Calvinist secret police and Inquisition were hunting on the docks of Amsterdam trying to find where is this hideous manuscript, his Ethics, Part 1, Appendix. He said, hence anyone who seeks for the true causes of miracles and strives to understand natural phenomena as an intelligent being and not gaze at them like a fool, he said, is set down and denounced as an impious heretic by those whom the masses adore as interpreters of nature and the gods. Such persons know that with the removal of ignorance, the wonder which forms their only available means for proving and preserving their authority would vanish also. Okay. And of course, that is part of our heritage going back centuries, as Unitarian Universalists. We are dissenters. Okay. And let's remember what we were dissenting against. Ideologies which place something ahead of our fellow beings, our fellow earthlings. And I thank you for your time and attention this morning.
Thank you very much, Lee, for that enlightening talk. Our closing hymn today is number 311, Let It Be a Dance from the Gray Hymnal. Please feel free to sing as the Spirit moves you, but with your masks on. Now stand and embody your spirit and join us in singing number 311, Let It Be a Dance.
Nothing's wrong and nothing's right. Let it be a dance.
So I don't generally mumble things to the universe, but here's a benediction, okay? Remember to go out and love each other, your families, your friends, make the world a better place. This is your brief moment. Everything passes. Have a good day.
Thank you, Lee, for sharing your valuable time and insights with us this morning. For those of you who would like to stay in the sanctuary for 10 to 15 minutes to share some discussion or observations from the service, please remain in the sanctuary or online. Please be aware that these comments will be posted online. For the rest of you, you are now welcome to adjourn into the parish hall. We'll invite Lee back to take some questions.
Any questions or comments? Sarcastic remarks? Hey, Walt.
Really? If I heard it correctly, I think you said that the extinctions occurred during warming times. Is that correct?
Higher rates of extinction occurred during those more rapid warming times. Part of the reason for that is because of the principles of evolution. The faster the environment is changing, the less rapidly natural selection can keep up. So there's an explanation for that. Yeah.
So in the movies and in our own minds, the idea of the comet coming down and destroying all the dinosaurs, was that just sort of a peculiar extinction pattern?
No, that's a pattern that has been repeated multiple times that has happened. But what it is, it's not so much that they're all directly killed by the asteroidal impact, but there's a bunch of biomass burning. The sun is blotted out, the climate cools rapidly, and there's scarcity of food and everything. The temperatures gyrate, and then those creatures which are not able to compete, they don't make it. But there's a bunch of ecological niches for little rat-like creatures to come along, which were our ancestors, Yeah.
If you could mention, now that you've mentioned catastrophic time when you have the so-called nuclear winter sort of idea.
Yep.
How about during those warming times when things went extinct, if you could characterize the kinds of animals that were destroyed? Because I guess what you said, I guess we've all heard that only the very teeniest of creatures survived during
Certain events, yeah.
during the cold time, nuclear winter. But this warming, you say, the fast warming led to a great many extinctions. What animals were the large ones? The low ones survived during that time as well? Or?
Right. So I'm talking specifically about the type of climate regime that prevailed during the Pleistocene, which was long periods of glaciation. It would start to warm and then it would zoom up really fast. Then there would be a long cooling period back down into the ice age. That cycle repeated multiple times during the Pleistocene. Within that special circumstance, all those animals that were cold adapted, like the woolly mammoth, the woolly rhino, short-faced bear, et cetera, there was greater danger that in those rapid warming periods, they would not be able to deal with the sudden rise in temperature. Now, we've had global warming, that's anthropogenic influence, global warming of 1 to 2 degrees. Look at all that's happened as a result of that. These are events where you had multiple tens of degrees jump in a few years. So some species were not able to keep up with that. Now, when it jumped up there and then stayed up there in the Pleistocene, then basically at that point, mammoths and some in the American lion and the dire wolf and so forth were not able to persist on. And certain ways of human subsistence. Our ancestors remembered this. They didn't have an explanation for it, but they remembered this stuff. They also remembered that the violent stuff came out of the sky too. Yeah. And they told the stories. Yes. No, I mean a lion that was very similar in size to the African lion, but it lived on the North American continent. And it's, if you go down to the George Marshall Museum down at La Brea, you can see where a lot of those Ice Age creatures are preserved there in the tar, including American lion, dire wolves, and so forth. Yes, Steve. Oh, yeah, we want to hear the questions. Shall I repeat the question?
I had a different question. I was wondering when you gave that lecture at, you said you used the term a religious conference.
Well, it was a conference of, I was a graduate student. I was invited to be part of scientists. There were church administrators and biblical scholars. We all gathered together, and I gave my talk as a graduate student. And there was a, kind of a silence after that.
I was just wondering if it was like mostly Christian or like
those were Christian, yes.
Okay.
Those were Christian, yes.
Yeah.
Which I was affiliated at that time as well, and they didn't appreciate me probably as much as I appreciated them, so I fit in less and less, and hence I find myself in this refugee camp from the Abrahamic religions here called the UU Church. Yeah. All right, so Steve asked a question about coming, and then we have Bill saying something. Go ahead, Steve.
You know how like
Come closer to the mic.
okay, like why did like
A little bit closer. You have a great voice.
why do certain no I don't. Why
No,
do
you have a radio voice. So.
sound good. All right, so why do like certain like people and
Mhm.
even animals have like gaps in their teeth?
And their teeth. Well, one of the interesting things is that our ancestors are, as our crania gets larger, and we lost this sagittal crest on top, and we actually know which genes were involved in the losing of the sagittal crest, where our mastoid muscles were attached up there. Okay, as our crania got larger, our jaws got smaller. Okay, and the so-called wisdom teeth, which are not, there's nothing smart or wise about them, right? Don't fit as well anymore because our faces got smaller, and and we're not talking about race, skin color, everything is all very superficial because we're all modern, anatomically modern Homo sapiens, right? Okay, but this change has made that smaller jaw, and sometimes our teeth are too big for our jaws. I know they are on mine, So, and I only had 3 wisdom teeth. They couldn't find one on one side. Okay, evolution is continuing to operate, and so plus remember, 60,000 years ago, a 2-year-old could probably outbite us. Well, it'd be a little longer than that. 700,000 years ago, a human 2-year-old could probably outbite us by jaw strength than what we are now, right? That was a previous species, Homo erectus, So yeah, so that's part of the reason. Small teeth, smaller jaw, large teeth. The spacing of teeth can leave space. It can leave extra spaces between teeth sometimes. Yeah, and your canines are really reduced, right? You've noticed that, right? In other words, what is our primary weapon? No big claws, no huge teeth. We can't run super fast. We can run long. Our primary weapon is between our ears, and in our heart, our ability to feel things. That's where our weapon is, which makes us the most dangerous predator, right? Okay. Yeah. All right. So Bill, and then go ahead. He had a question first, and then I'll come to you. Go ahead, Bill. And then you. Yeah.
I'm not sure whether this is a statement or an observation. It seems that when dealing with Abrahamic faiths, and especially more with a sort of I'm on the more mystic side of the street, you know me.
I do. And I appreciate that. Yes, very, very much.
But sometimes it seems like when the mystics and the people who are looking at things through a more scientific glow, such as Mr. Spinoza,
Yeah.
are looking at each other, and both of them practicing in a very weird Italian slash Western slash Southern accent, coming up with there's only room enough for one of us in this here boat.
Yes.
And
Yep.
it seems like the Abrahamics, the way you cope is Armageddon. There's other people using more of a can we all get along. As a man of science who early on you made your decisions on which way you'd be going, but also as a person with mysticism, what is your balancing game?
Right.
Also more about Spinoza.
Well, as you know, I am somewhat of a Spinozista, right? Okay. But I also appreciate the mystical side. As you know, when we have done stuff together about Buddhist meditation and so forth. So there's both things. I don't denigrate either of those things. Okay. But there is a world. I'm not a postmodernist. There is a world out there independent of whether we think about it or not, or what we think about it, or whether we like it or not, right? There is a reality out there that exists outside of our mind, okay? Our mind can experience things in a mystical way, but it can also learn things, right? The problem, so we can talk about inflection points in history. The Younger Dryas impact event was an inflection point in history. The arising to hegemony of the Abrahamic religions was an inflection point in history. It was a kind of inflection point where there was a claims about an in-group and out-group, meaning the saved and the damned, the chosen, the unchosen, the Ummah, those not part of the Ummah, all of that stuff, the infidels, whatever. All right, is that you have two different moralities, how to treat inside and how you treat other side, the outside. And it's an ideology which allows people to yearn for the end of the world as a moral good. And there's nuclear weapons. Not a good mix, okay? We can survive many Danziger-Ushker events and Al-Arad bowlings and impacts and all of that. Can we survive our own nihilism and our amorality? And make no mistake, Abrahamic covenantal, in-group, out-group, amorality is amoral. If it isn't universal, it's not moral. That's the primary objection, not that people tell you lies about science or this or that, but that the morality does not pass muster. And any God we worship should be at least as moral as we are, not less, right? So that's kind of my short answer, which will be on the internet, LOL. Okay, all right, yes, go right. You had a question, right?
Your last comment kind of hit on my question. And
You have a nice voice too, so speak up a little bit more. Yes.
Okay. Do you think you said that it's morally wrong to treat certain people as like outsiders, and
Yes.
I was just wondering how that plays out, how just like asking for wisdom,
Yes.
practically how that plays out with people, I don't know, who, for example, diehard Trump supporters who
Yes.
like deny that January 6th happened.
Yeah.
I'm like, how do I interact with that kind of a person?
Well, what we have, first of all, is our common humanity, right? If we only talk with people we agree with, right? We just have a choir, right? We're all just singing off the same page. But if we talk with people whom we don't agree with, that requires moral maturity, right? That requires attempt to put yourself in their shoes, okay? Now, you might have noticed that the world is at war. has been, we're in World War III since September 11th, 2001. Okay. And you might have noticed that there's a ploy about the clash of civilizations, right? Judaism and Christianity versus Islam and all this stuff. That kind of stuff is medieval. It is medieval. It is dark, it is nihilistic, and it is amoral. Okay. We didn't learn morality from these traditions. That morality is written in our DNA by evolution. And it's up to us to wisely see that all of us are actually of the same tribe, earthlings. We're in one boat. We start poking holes. Who's going to go down? We start firing missiles. Who's going to go down, right? So that's the kind of thinking that we must get beyond. And it's the kind of thinking that has created an inflection point within the last 2,300 years, the last couple of millennia, out of over 300 millennia on which anatomically modern humans have been on Earth, which could bring us to a nuclear annihilation. It's going to be harder for life to bounce back after Earth has bounced back after an impact winter many times. Nuclear winter is a little harder to bounce back from, right? Because there's all the contamination, right? So the best way to decolonize and to reduce hatred is to start by liberating our own minds of othering people who are not of the same religion, ethnicity, color, gender expression, blah, 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 blah. You know, the story, we're all in this together. That's morality. Anything else is pretending. That is the whole lesson of the Euthyphro dialogue in Plato's dialogues, right? Socrates was on trial for impiety. What's impiety? Speaking against the gods, right? He's being brought up in there. And a very zealous young man named Euthyphro came and said, oh, yeah, well, I'm taking my father to court because he beat and mistreated a slave, and he needs to be punished for that. And my family is against me for punishing the harshness of my father toward this slave. But I know what I'm doing and I'm right. Socrates, of course, Socrates never answers questions. He always asks them, right? Socrates asked, well, what is impiety? Because, I'm facing a court case too. I need to know what it is, right? Maybe you can help me with my defense. So the ever-wise Euthyphro says, well, he starts to try to explain piety, and he couldn't give an answer for piety. Piety is what the gods command us to do pious because they command it to us, or must the gods command it because it's pious? What is it? He got all tangled up, right? And Socrates leaves it unanswered in aporia, which is in the Greek, meaning that you get to decide the answer. Piety and morality are not the same things. There is a standard of morality to which even the gods have to abide. It's universal. If the gods don't measure up, they aren't moral. That's the critique, you see. That's the lesson of the Euthyphro dialogue. The Abrahamic traditions have not really learned the lesson of the Euthyphro dialogue. Look at the Middle East. Look at all those who are yearning and praying for the destruction of the world. Why don't we consider that a form of pathology when we would try to stop and save somebody about to jump off a bridge? Wait, life is worth living. Don't jump. You have life. They want to take us all with them. Sorry, not interested. You keep your apocalypse in your diseased imaginations. Don't try to foist it on the rest of us with nuclear weapons and all of that. Yes. Yes.
The connection between Medusa.
Yes, Medusa.
Can you elaborate a little bit, please?
Well, I'm pretty sure that you're probably a better mythologist than I am, but Medusa is one of those destructive creatures in mythology, right? With snakes for hair, and if you looked in her eyes, you would be turned to stone and all of that. Well, the creatures which have dragons, snakes for hair, serpents, all of that is a metaphor that the ancients probably used to recognize that a comet of doom was hanging overhead. They realized, probably because there was, at the start of the Younger Dryas, there was probably more than one impact. So they knew, oh no, here it comes again, like a fiery head of hair, and destruction and subsidence and rising seawater and storms and fire and all of this come at the same time, and floods. You see, so that's probably the roots. You, with your much more resonant voice, could give a talk on mythology that would be better than what I could give. Both of you have better voices than I do for radio. Yes, Grace.
So you mentioned certain group,
Oh yes, let's pull it down because
certain groups of people who are praying for.
if you pull it down to you, your feet will still be on the ground. You'll still be able to reach the ground.
I don't want to break it. So groups of people who are praying for an apocalypse because
And fighting for it, yes.
supposedly after the apocalypse, there's going to be a new
Yes.
order issued in
Yes.
where everyone is going to
Yes.
be righteous and saved.
Everything's going to be wonderful and glorious.
Right.
And there's a world coming. There is seldom people involved in genocides. There's been many genocides in history who say, you know what, I'm a pig. This is a genocide. I'm going to kill you, right? They mostly say, we're building a new and better world, but it doesn't include you. That's what genocidal people say. Genocidaires, whether it's Rwanda, the Nazi Holocaust, the Armenian Holocaust, the destruction of Carthage, whatever it was, we're building a better world. You have no place in it. That is pathological thinking.
And if there is a nuclear apocalypse or whatever, the
Yes.
whole earth is going to go anyway. So who's left?
That's right. Well,
Wins.
David Gantz wrote a song a number of years ago called "Who Will Save Us from the Saved?" He said, right, where he described people that think they can trash the earth, get raptured out, and the rest of us would just be in the mess left, right? That shows a level of spiritual narcissism. And mind you, this is not blaming the people. It's a pathological system which was taught to the people. And I completely agree with Richard Dawkins when he says it is cruel, wicked, and abusive to indoctrinate children with religion. That's exactly right. Cruel, wicked, and abusive. Yes. Yes, Bill. Yep.
We have these big die-out periods.
Yes.
All right. Does evolution lurch? I mean, it's got to be harder with plutonium in the system, but does evolution lurch after a big crash? Like once we're on the upswing again, is it like, oh shit, what we need is a whole lot of nematodes right now and a whole lot of variants on the spider? Does it? We need some pouncer predators weighing less than an ounce. I mean, we've got a SAG coming right now, but is there something? We've got seed banks. How about genetic banks that might help us out?
Yes. Well, the thing about life is that it's stubborn. Okay. Life keeps bouncing back. Now, it is said often, the intelligent design people who butcher both the science and mathematics and statistics, they manage to mash all of them.
Team effort.
Yes, it's a team effort. Yes. So what they claim is that the most adaptive, the best way to do things is by a top down, right? Even our computer programmers today know that evolutionary algorithms are the way that you really explore a multidimensional phase space to find a fitness landscape, right? So for instance, if I'm tracing ancestries and I've got 50 some taxa and I don't know how many DNA, I am exploring a space which has more dimensions, meaning dimensions,
Yeah.
orthogonal dimensions, Then the number of particles in the universe, 10 to the 80, right? Right. So how is that space to be explored? It is explored by an evolutionary algorithm. So the smartest, most divine thing that the source behind the universe, however you want to address the deity, see, I have a mystical side too, right? Okay. All right. Can do is not by tinkering and being a god of the gaps, fiddling around, this can never work, but to implant an algorithm by which that multidimensional phase space for a fitness landscape can be explored.
Don't create the worm, create the path of the squiggly.
All you have to do is open a bunch of ecological spaces, and those self-replicating molecules, you know, what Dawkins calls the selfish genes, but which he said I could have just as easily written the title, The Altruistic Animal, because it's the same thing. Selfish gene and the altruistic animal is the same thing, because of course capitalists misunderstood what he was writing. So, this is my favorite book. They didn't understand the thing he was writing in it probably much, but they misunderstood what the point of the book was. Now, it just so happens that our morality arises out of the process of exploring that phase space. The golden rule, the diamond rule, which is do unto others as they would wish to be done by, right? And reciprocity arises out of the process of that space. That's why you know what is moral. And that's why the Euthyphro dialogue shows that morality is higher than any of the gods, you say. Yeah. Yep. Yes, Grace. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation. We'll call it there. And if you have any other questions, we will probably be out in the parish hall, right?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.